Somewhere on your family tree, there might be a Viking, a banned outlaw, a Norman knight who invaded England, or a man who was legally forbidden from using his own name. And the strange part is, all you need to find out which one is your last name. Today, we are breaking down 10 Scottish surnames, and what the real historical record, not the tourist shop tartan chart, actually says about where they came from. Some of these will surprise you, and a few might genuinely shock you. So stick around, because by the end of this video, you will know more about your own surname than most Scots do. Before we start, if this kind of hidden history is your thing, hit subscribe right now. This channel digs up the details genealogy websites and tourist brochures leave out. Okay, let's get into it. Quick myth to clear up first, because it changes how you should think about everything else in this video. Having a clan's surname does not automatically mean you are descended by blood from that clan's chief. For most of Highland history, a clan was a community of allegiance, not strictly a family tree. If you lived on a chief's land, if you needed his protection, or if you married into his territory, you could simply take his surname. No blood relation required. Historians call these surname groups septs, and a lot of the sept lists sold in gift shops today were actually drawn up in the 1800s just to sell more tartan to tourists without a clan name of their own. It goes even deeper. Geneticists have tested this directly, and studies on British surnames found that even genuinely single-founder surnames pick up what researchers call non-paternity events, generation after generation, at roughly 1 to 2% per generation through adoption, remarriage, or plain old infidelity. Multiply that across 20 generations and the math gets messy fast. For what it's worth, the real historical rate is far lower than the urban myth that 1 in 3 men are secretly not their father's biological son. It is closer to a few percent per generation, but that is still enough to matter over centuries. So keep that in mind as we go through these 10 names. Every single one of them has a real, documented origin. But whether that origin is actually sitting in your own bloodline is a separate question entirely. Now, on to the names. Let's start with the most Scottish name imaginable, at least on paper. Wallace, as in William Wallace, Braveheart, the man who led the fight against English occupation and became Scotland's most enduring symbol of independence. Here's the twist. The surname Wallace does not mean Scottish. It does not even mean warrior. It comes from the Anglo-Norman French word Wallace, meaning Welshman, or more broadly, foreigner. It traces back further to an old Germanic root that simply meant outsider, someone who was not one of us. In medieval Scotland, the name was given to people descended from the old Brittonic-speaking Britons of Strathclyde, a Celtic kingdom in southwest Scotland that was culturally distinct from both the Gaelic Highlands and the English-influenced lowlands. So the man history remembers as the ultimate Scottish patriot carried a surname that literally marked his family as outsiders in their own country. It's one of the great ironies buried in Scottish history, and almost nobody who cheers for Braveheart knows it. Next, MacDonald, one of the largest and most recognizable clans in the world. Clan Donald traces its name back to a 12th century warlord named Somerled, a man usually described as a great Gaelic hero who drove the Norse out of the Hebrides. Except, genetics tells a very different story. In 2005, Oxford geneticist Brian Sykes tested the Y chromosomes of men descended from Clan Donald and found a single distinct genetic signature running through a huge portion of them. His conclusion was that Somerled likely has around 500,000 living male line descendants today, making him the second most prolific traceable ancestor in recorded history, behind only Genghis Khan. And that genetic signature is not Gaelic at all, it is Norse. It shows up almost exclusively in Norway, Iceland, and the parts of the Hebrides connected to Clan Donald. Somerled's own name is the Gaelicized version of an Old Norse word meaning summer wanderer, which was also a term used for Viking raiders. So the clan most people think of as the definitive Highland Scottish family may actually be one of the largest surviving Viking bloodlines on the planet. Here's a fitting footnote. For generations after Somerled's death, the early chiefs of Clan Donald were technically vassals of the Norwegian crown, ruling the Hebrides for the King of Norway, until Scotland finally won control of those islands at the Battle of Largs in 1263. Clan Donald did not just descend from Vikings, they were politically Norwegian subjects for generations. Campbell is next, and this one has two surprises stacked on top of each other. First, the name itself. Campbell does not mean anything noble or heroic. It comes from the Gaelic phrase Campbell, which translates to crooked mouth. It was almost certainly a physical nickname for an early ancestor, possibly a Lochaway chief who supposedly spoke out of one side of his mouth. His family liked the nickname enough to keep it as their surname. Second surprise, and this one is bigger. Most people learn about the 1692 Glencoe massacre as a straightforward clan feud, Campbells slaughtering MacDonalds over old grudges. That is not really what happened. Government soldiers, many of whom were not even Campbells, were ordered by the crown to wipe out the MacDonalds of Glencoe as a political statement, meant to terrify every other Highland clan into swearing loyalty to the new king. The soldiers had been peacefully lodged in MacDonald homes for nearly 2 weeks, under the ancient rules of Highland hospitality, before they turned on their hosts in the middle of the night. It was state-sponsored killing, dressed up afterward as a clan rivalry, because that version of the story was easier for everyone in power to live with. Around 38 MacDonalds were killed outright, including the elderly clan chief, and dozens more died from exposure fleeing into the snow afterward. Those same soldiers had been eating at the MacDonald's tables for nearly 2 weeks first, and in the Highlands, breaking that bond of hospitality made the betrayal feel even worse than the killing itself. Number 4 is MacGregor, and this might be the wildest story on this entire list. In 1603, after a bloody battle at Glenfruin near Loch Lomond, King James VI did something almost unheard of in legal history. He did not just punish the MacGregors, he banned their name. By royal decree, the surname MacGregor was legally abolished. Anyone caught using it could be executed. Clan members had to adopt other surnames just to survive, names like Grant, Murray, Drummond, or Campbell. Women of the clan were reportedly branded and whipped. The ban lasted on and off for more than 170 years, not fully lifted until 1774. The MacGregors became known as the Children of the Mist, hiding in the most remote parts of the Highlands just to exist. The most famous MacGregor of all, the outlaw Rob Roy, had to legally go by his mother's surname, Campbell, because using his own name could have gotten him killed. The clan chief at the time, Alistair MacGregor of Glenstray, was lured to Edinburgh under a promise of safe passage and hanged at the city's public execution site soon after. Historians estimate roughly 94 MacGregors were executed or killed in just the first 10 years of the ban alone. So if your family tree suddenly shows a Grant, a Murray, or a Campbell appearing out of nowhere in the 1600s with no clear explanation, there is a real chance you're actually looking at a MacGregor in disguise. Now let's talk about Bruce, because this one surprises almost everyone. Robert. The Bruce is remembered as the ultimate Scottish king, the man who beat the English at Bannockburn and secured Scotland's independence. But the Bruce family was not Scottish at all, at least not originally. They were Norman French. The surname comes from Brix, a Norman fortress town in France, and the family arrived in Britain with William the Conqueror in 1066, the very same invasion that conquered England. A Bruce ancestor even appears in the Domesday Book, England's great land survey from the 11th century. An early Bruce ancestor received vast landholdings in Yorkshire, England, for fighting alongside William the Conqueror decades before any Bruce set foot in Scotland. It was not until a couple of generations later that a Bruce was granted land in Scotland by King David I, and the family became Scottish by adoption, not by ancient bloodline. So Scotland's most legendary independence-fighting king descended directly from the same Norman knights who conquered England in the first place, and his own family held English land and English loyalties for generations before they ever became Scottish icons. This next one is even bigger because it is not just one family, it is the entire royal house of Stewart, later spelled Stewart. Most people assume the Stewarts were an ancient Highland Gaelic dynasty. They were not. The name comes from a job title, steward, and the family's roots trace back to Brittany in France, to a hereditary steward position in a town called Dol. A Breton knight named Alan Fitzflad brought the family to Britain in the early 1100s, and his descendant Walter eventually became High Steward of Scotland under King David I. The office became hereditary, and Stewart became the family surname. Generations later, that same family produced the kings and queens of Scotland and eventually of England too. And here's how those first two names on our list actually connect. A later High Steward named Walter married Marjorie Bruce, daughter of Robert the Bruce himself, in 1315, and their son became the very first Stuart King of Scotland. So the royal bloodline most associated with Scottish identity was, at its root, a French-speaking administrative family from Brittany, whose surname literally just meant somebody's steward, until one lucky royal marriage changed everything. If your mind is already a little blown, wait until you hear the next four, especially the one connected to Outlander. But quickly, if you want more videos like this one, tap that subscribe button now and drop a comment telling me which surname on this list is closest to your own family name. I read every single one. All right, let's keep going. Fraser is a name a lot of you probably know from Outlander, thanks to the character Jamie Fraser. But the real history of Clan Fraser is even more dramatic than the show. The Frasers arrived in Britain from France, likely with William the Conqueror's forces in 1066, before eventually settling in Scotland. And the real-life clan chief, Simon Fraser, the 11th Lord Lovat, actually has a direct fictional connection, since he is written into Outlander as Jamie's own grandfather. But his true story needs no fiction at all. Known as the Old Fox for switching sides between the Jacobites and the government whenever it suited him, Simon Fraser was captured hiding inside a hollow tree after the failed Jacobite Rising of 1745, and put on trial for treason in London. His sentence was originally hanging, drawing, and quartering, the standard punishment for treason, before it was commuted to a single beheading. On April 9, 1747, he became the last person ever executed by beheading in Britain. Spectators packed Tower Hill to watch, so many that a wooden viewing stand collapsed and killed several onlookers in the crush, just moments before the execution even began. Fraser reportedly kept his composure and even his dark sense of humor right up to the final moment. If your surname is Fraser, your clan's own chief holds one of the strangest historical footnotes in all of British history. MacLeod comes from the Gaelic MacLeod, meaning son of Leod, and Leod's name comes from the Old Norse Leotar, a name that roughly translates to ugly or light-complexioned. So, right away, another supposedly pure Highland clan turns out to have Viking roots. The clan itself even splits into two historic branches named after Leod's descendants, the Seal Tormoid on Skye and Harris, and the Seal Torkal on Lewis, both names built from Norse personal names, not Gaelic ones. But the real twist came from the clan's own DNA project. Researchers tested hundreds of MacLeod men and found something unexpected. There is not one MacLeod bloodline. There are at least two, genetically distinct from each other. Men from the Harris and Dunvegan branch carry a different genetic signature than men from the Lewis and Rasey branch, even though both branches share the same surname, the same tartan, and even the same chief. In other words, two men can both be MacLeods in every legal and cultural sense, and still not share a common male ancestor within any meaningful genealogical time frame. The surname united them politically centuries ago. Biology never fully agreed. Sinclair is next, and this one is less about hidden history and more about how a real family got buried under an invented one. The Sinclairs were Normans, plain and simple, taking their name from St. Clair sur Epte in Normandy, a name that literally translates to holy light, and arriving in Scotland by the 1100s. One early Sinclair served as guardian to the heir of King Alexander III, and over the generations the family became Earls of Orkney and Caithness, eventually building the stunningly detailed Rosslyn Chapel outside Edinburgh in the 1400s. That is the real history, and it is impressive enough on its own. But thanks to books like The Da Vinci Code and Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the Sinclairs got swept up in modern conspiracy folklore, tied to invented stories about the Knights Templar, secret bloodlines, and hidden treasures supposedly buried beneath the chapel. None of that is historically documented. But the myth is now so popular that it draws more tourists to Rosslyn Chapel than the family's genuine, well-recorded Norman and Norse history ever did on its own. And finally, Armstrong, and this is the one that trips up almost every American with Scottish ancestry. If your surname is Armstrong, Elliot, Johnston, Graham, or Bell, you probably assume your family came from a Highland clan. They did not. Those are border Reivers names from the lawless frontier zone between Scotland and England, a completely different culture from the Highland clans, with no tartans, no Gaelic, and no clan chiefs in the Highland sense at all. The Armstrongs, specifically, were considered the most feared riding family on the entire frontier. By 1528, they could reportedly put 3,000 mounted riders into the saddle for a single raid. Border families like the Armstrongs answered to their own surname more than to either crown, raiding in whichever direction the prophet happened to be that season. And here's a detail almost nobody knows. When astronaut Neil Armstrong visited Scotland after walking on the moon, he was told that his own surname connected him directly to that same family of border reivers, cattle rustlers, and raiders who terrorized the Anglo-Scottish frontier for 300 years. The first man on the moon descended from some of the most notorious outlaws in British history. So there you have it, 10 surnames, and honestly, 10 completely different stories than most people expect. A national hero whose own name means foreigner. A Highland clan that turns out to be genetically Viking. A massacre blamed on an old rivalry that was actually ordered by the government. A name so dangerous it was illegal to even say out loud. Kings and legends who trace back to Norman France and Brittany rather than the Highlands at all. And a family whose real history got buried under a Hollywood conspiracy myth. If there is one thing this list proves, it is that your surname is not a simple label. It is a 500-year paper trail of alliances, survival, war, migration, and sometimes outright deception. The real story behind almost any surname is stranger and better than the version printed on a tourist shop tartan card. And if you are watching this from the United States, there is a good chance one of these names is in your own family tree for a specific historical reason. Between roughly 1760 and 1860, tens of thousands of Highland families were forced off their land during what is now called the Highland Clearances, cleared out to make room for more profitable sheep farming. Many of those families crossed the Atlantic into the Carolinas, Virginia, and the Appalachian backcountry, while others headed into Nova Scotia and Cape Breton Island in Canada. Plenty also quietly anglicized their own names to get by, which is part of why MacDonald sometimes turns into Donaldson a generation later. So if your surname is on this list and your roots run through the American South, that is not a coincidence. That is the Clearances still showing up on your family tree today. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this one. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on notifications because there is even more hidden history and surprising DNA science coming very soon. Let me know in the comments which of these 10 surprised you the most. And if your own last name did not make this list, tell me what it is. It might end up in a future video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.